We are on native lands in Ashland, Oregon, where I am. I don't know where all of you are, but we are on the traditional lands of the Takelma, Shasta, and Letgawa people who were forcibly removed and to whom we owe an unpaid debt of land, culture, and history. You can explore more about native land where you are on this map or through other resources, and I'll pop that link into the chat once we move on here. So we will be recording the session tonight. And if you have an idea for a class or a speaker, feel free to drop that in the chat and we'll try to capture that. You can always email me. My contact is in a variety of places, Rachel Whirling at oregonstate.edu. So this evening's presentation is part of our community education series, which is put together with the help of a volunteer committee. We reach out to instructors, we poll our community for ideas, things that folks want to learn about. If you want to hear about upcoming classes, you can just go to our website. You can search, just Google OSU Land Steward Program, and you'll find our homepage on the OSU website. Scroll down just a little bit and you get to that check mark, and if you click that, you can join and you'll get our announcements of upcoming classes. That's really all that comes across on that email list. At the end, I think I put our 3-question survey in this, I hope. And if you have a minute, please stick around so we can do that, so we can see how things are going. Let's see. Oops, here we go. So including things that are coming up, we don't have registrations open yet, but I still wanted to tease you with a few things that are coming up. February 1st, we have Google Earth Tools for Landowners with Scott Good. On February 8th, we have Resilient Pastures, Pasture Management in Drought Conditions with Gordon Jones. In April, we will be running the Oregon Master Naturalist Klamath-Siskiyou Ecoregion course, which it's been a few years, 3 years, I think, since we've been able to do that. And that will be 6 field days over 3 months. And I will also put a link to that website in the chat. We don't, again, registration for that is not open yet, but it will be coming up. And the way that program works is technically you're supposed to have completed an online course prior to that, and I'll give you a link that explains how all that works. Some of you might know about it, so I'm just letting you know that it's going to be coming up this spring. Also, because we're on Zoom and you guys could be anywhere, I wanted to let you know that there's new news that the Tualatin Soil and Water Conservation District is probably going to be offering a hybrid land steward course in Washington County, based in Washington County. So that might even include some field days. If I think that's what they're planning. So watch for news about that as well. And we are going to be planning a new year of classes soon. So I'll be sending out a survey over that email list, the MailChimp email list, to get your ideas and see what it is that you would like to learn about. So those are our announcements. And with that, I want to introduce our wonderful and competent presenter from the Jackson Soil and Water Conservation District, Kora Mousseaux. So she's the Community Water Resource Conservationist. She provides technical and financial assistance to landowners in Jackson County to implement stewardship projects that protect and conserve water and other natural resources. Kora has a bachelor's degree in environmental studies from SOU. She is homegrown and a wonderful resource. Okay, so with that, I will stop my share and turn the reins over to Kora.
Great, thanks, Rachel. Thanks for the lovely introduction, and I'm looking forward to those future classes too. Those look like some good ones.
Yeah,
so I'm just curious, before we get started, if folks can just type in the chat, did anyone attend last week's Winter Dream Summer Gardens class? And I taught on stormwater management. I should be specific. I know there was a lot of classes last week. I ask because there's going to be a lot of similar slides, and I think I mentioned that last week too, but just so everyone is aware, there'll be some similar information. Yep, saw you, Marcy. Yep. Well, if no one else but Marcy attended, then there'll be some new faces, which is nice. But okay, well, I will go ahead and share my screen. Okay, all new. All right, not seeing anyone else. Okay, well, that's actually a good thing because I don't want to bore everyone with the same information. So super. I think that might be for the best. So I'll just put this in full screen. And is everyone seeing that? Is that good, Rachel?
Yes, looks great.
Okay, so we're going to get started. So as Rachel mentioned, my name is Kora Mousseaux. I'm the Community Water Resource Conservationist at Jackson Soil and Water Conservation District. And today we will be talking about Waterwise landscaping. So just a brief outline here. For the first 40 minutes, I'll be giving a brief overview about the district. Not everyone is aware of who we are, so I just kind of always want to give you a brief overview of what we're all about. And then we're going to talk about water conservation, just more generally water conservation techniques. And then we are going to start diving into Waterwise landscaping techniques. We'll then have a brief break about halfway through, finish up that Waterwise landscaping, and then we'll have an allotted question and answers time. So if you have questions throughout, please type them in the chat box, as Rachel had mentioned before, and then I'll be able to get to those during the Q&A time. And within allotted time, I'll also be reviewing some follow-up resources that I feel like is kind of useful to get more of a hands-on, you know, kind of a tour rather than just a list and tell you good luck. So, so that's the outline of what we will be discussing today. So who is JSWCD? So our main slogan is turning natural resource concerns into opportunities. And so just a brief history lesson here. So we were born from the Dust Bowl era. Back in the 1930s, there was dust storms, a lot of arid conditions, conditions that made agriculture incredibly challenging. Farmers were, losing farmable land, and it was just a very, very challenging time on the heels of the Great Depression. And so what FDR did was he signed the Soil Conservation Act in 1935, and this created a federal entity known as the Soil Conservation Service. And they were a federal agency designed to come out and help farmers like on the ground with their soil health. And today they're known as the Natural Resources Conservation Service. And so if you've heard of NRCS or you're aware of different agencies within the USDA, the United States Department of Agriculture, that's them. And it was soon after that, it was determined that there needed to be more of a localized version. Even then, they weren't a huge fan of having feds on their property. And so soil conservation districts were established. And so obviously, NRCS today is nationwide, and soil conservation districts were roughly in every county and every state in the entire country, and we're all called different things. In California, they're called resource conservation districts, and here in Oregon, we're soil and water conservation districts. So Jackson County, we were established in 1966, and a huge part of our history locally is that in 2006, tax rate was passed. So for every $1,000 of assessed property value, we get 5 cents of that. And that goes to our oversight, our salaries, and the programs and projects that we offer. So in order to give back, basically, we think of that with giving back from the tax rate. Our main driver is providing technical assistance to Jackson County residents and land managers. So we work from everywhere from smaller scale, urban lots, urban residents, small farms. We've done some larger orchards and commercial lots. Just anyone who's managing or owning land in Jackson County that has questions on natural resource concerns. And I'll have our priorities list on the next page to give you kind of a better idea of the things that we focus on. But we have many services that we provide here at Jackson Soil and Water. We help with project planning. We do a lot of, we call it one-off site visits, where a landowner or property manager might not necessarily be in need of a grant from us, but they just kind of need some guidance. So instead of having a class from us like this, it's more of a hands-on experience. And so we'll do one-off site visits, give them some handouts, information, discuss next steps, discuss the goals of their property and what they can do. We also do have a small grants program that we get from the tax dollars and also some funding from the state. And so there's different scopes of those grants, but that's a large huge component of what we do. We're grant managers as well. And we can also help connect folks to more external, larger scale grants. And then we also do a lot of education programs. We teach classes and workshops. We table at various events. We do a day camp every summer for a bunch of middle schoolers who learn about natural resources. And then we also have various programs such as water quality monitoring. So kind of we're everything to everyone, we like to say, but we also try and all focus on different things. And so yeah, that's kind of the overview of what we do. And these are all of our natural resource concerns that we prioritize. I went ahead and bolded water conservation since that's what we're talking about today. All right, so now that you kind of have a general idea of who the district is, now we're going to dive into water conservation. So why should we conserve water? Pretty redundant and I know obvious to a lot of us. But we should conserve water because our water falls as snow. And as we know, due to climate change and due to really the inconsistency of precipitation that we receive here locally and regionally, it's always best to err on the side of caution. At least municipalities, we rely on snowpack for our municipal water. And with that wavering, it's just good to conserve as much water as possible. And we also hear, depending on where you're located, if you're on a well or aquifer is so inconsistent, it's just good to conserve as much water as possible, regardless if you're on city lines or on a well. So in terms of reservoir storage, this was the most recent report from Bureau of Rec as of October 16th. And so here in the Rogue, very low. So just more and more need to conserve water. I know the different climate models, but then also the actual percentages here are always kind of bleak, but I think it's important to explain why we're doing this, coming back to the reason. So this is the most recent drought monitoring report as of last month. And so I mostly just focus on Jackson County since that's what we do, but obviously you can look at Josephine as well. Jackson County is pretty much split between being in a severe drought and an extreme drought. And I'm looking forward to see what this report looks like as of November and December as we're getting a good amount of rain. But obviously we had a very, very dry summer. And so, just more and more reason to conserve that water since we know that this great rain we've been getting won't last all year. And one of the biggest things with all of this water conservation is trying to be the most precise with our limited time and resources. I know there's, over the years, we've all heard of different things that we can do to conserve water in our homes, right? You can take shorter showers, you can shut off the faucet between washing or brushing your teeth, and all these different water saving techniques in the home, which is totally great. And we should absolutely be doing all those things. But I think that, the biggest bang for your buck is certainly going to be focusing on your yard. And whether you're in a small urban lot with a small yard, or you have, a big field, over 50% of residential water is used in yards. And so in terms of prioritizing what to do, since we all have, limited time and very busy schedules, focusing on the yard is not only going to save money for you, but that's going to be the biggest water conserving effort that you can do. So here's just another beautiful drought indicator. This is for groundwater. So again, we're seeing a theme here, lots of red. So the wetness percentile in Jackson County and Southern Oregon looks like it's between 2 and 10%, so very low. And then these are little silver lining here, the precip and temperature, and this again was as of last month. They hadn't updated it, but we were above average precip and below temperature. So it's funny how much it shifted into a different season from summer. Okay, So now that we have some kind of climate background, making sure I'm good on time. Okay. So now that we have some background on climate models that I know a lot of us are familiar with, now I'm going to dive into some things that folks can do, within your yard, and it's not going to be a bunch of additional stuff or additional costs. It's more of maintenance tweaks that you can make. So the first thing is this is assuming that you already have a lawn or at least sections of lawn, and then we'll get into Waterwise landscaping in a bit. So number one is just making sure that your sprinklers are doing what they're supposed to do. So if there's any leaks within the sprinkler system, that can be a major issue. You can lose gallons and gallons and gallons of water just from one little leak. And so that's going to raise your bill and also, obviously waste our precious water. And so just making sure that there's no leaks, everything's good to go. You have all the sprinklers adjusted properly, meaning you don't have a sprinkler head facing the street or the sidewalk, for example. I know all of us have seen that. Some people really efficiently water those sidewalks, but they're just not, that it's not a properly adjusted sprinkler. Sprinklers should just water grass. So yeah, just making sure that the irrigation system is set up will go a long way. And also adjusting sprinklers for climate, shutting off the system when it rains, just very kind of common sense things can go a long way in saving water for your existing system. Number two is maintaining the lawn. I always recommend for folks to mow high. Still will be mowing the lawn, but it's just adjusting the lawnmower to be at the highest setting. This helps strengthen roots, which there'll be a couple slides here that'll show that in more detail. Strengthening roots does a couple different things. It helps outcompete weeds, and it also increases the lawn's water holding capacity. And I always like to mention this, even though we're talking about water conservation and not water quality, but they do go hand in hand. So if you are applying any additives such as fertilizers or pesticides, make sure to follow the label, only apply it if it's needed. And fertilizers, if they're not applied properly, those, lawn can retain that fertilizer. And then if the lawn clippings aren't disposed of properly, that can cause some aquatic issues down the stream. So just making sure everything's disposed of properly also goes a long way with lawn maintenance. All right, so let's move on. So some other basic things after I'd say number two, now we're getting to more expensive, more less just maintenance, but more changes to make to the yard. But number two, again, is checking for leaks. Another thing, if you're using a well, if you're not on municipal water, but if you're using a well and you're wondering, do I need an additional water source? How do I tell? You can install a level sensor. This goes a long way. A lot of them are automated anymore. You can have it sent to your phone. And so if your well goes below a certain amount, it can send you a notification, and then you'll know if you'll need some additional water sources. Installing water storage tanks is another one, very, very popular. I personally have 18 people waitlisted for funds for water tank installation, just, between drought and trying to capture as much water as possible, offsetting irrigation costs, and having just water on hand for fire season. It's very, very popular. So you can certainly install a rainwater catchment storage, or you can install a tank so you can, bring in some well water so it's more accessible. There's certainly permitting that goes to that, and that's a whole class within itself. But I want to mention that as well because that's definitely related to water conservation. And then we have replacing lawn with Waterwise species. And this is the main point that we'll get into more detail on. I'll go over all those steps. And then number 5 is considering installing other stormwater features to help filter pollution and also act as a nice water conservation feature. And so the examples I provided are rain gardens and bioswales. Shameless plug, I taught a class a couple of years ago on both rain gardens and bioswales. It's on YouTube. from the extension posted that. And so if you want to know more of the steps to installing those, I would recommend looking up that class, but it certainly is hand in hand with Waterwise landscaping. So just another reason why focusing on changing water practices in the yard is going to be the most beneficial. This is a chart for Medford Water Commission from a few years back, and this runs from July to July. And so there's no mistaking that, you know, our water usage is going up in alignment with the irrigation season. Our water use around the home is roughly the same year round. I'm sure we're just going to inherently be using some more water in the summer, but it spikes up during those hot months. And it was crazy to see that an average Medford residential house, so the whole household, uses around 20 to 25 gallons of water, 20 to 25,000 gallons of water in the summer. I don't know why that was a mouthful. So that's a lot of water. And so this again goes to, you know, the necessity of focusing on the yard. I think I nailed that point. So let's move on. So another thing that you can do kind of just for simple maintenance is you can install water timers and sprinkler timers. A lot of folks already do this. Something to note though is to make sure that the smart controllers, that you're being smarter than the smart controller. So a lot of folks will have these scheduled, and then when it rains, they won't shut off the system. So that's, you know, a very simple thing, but I can't tell you how many times my neighbors have either been out of town or they're home and it's pouring down rain and then their sprinklers kick on. So just a very simple thing to shut off the sprinklers when rain is in the forecast, making sure you're not raining or you're not watering during the heat of the day. Early mornings is best. And also a lot of folks overwater. And so I recommend that you water less often, but a bit longer. That will help with the roots of the grass itself to be a bit stronger and be able to hold that water. It kind of builds up that hardiness, just as you would with a house plant. You don't want to overwater it because then it will become dependent on all of that water. And so there's a resource that I can review for those of you who aren't familiar within Medford Water Commission. They have a really great resource on that. Just a quick plug on timers. Timers are great, but you got to be smarter than the timer. And nice, there we go. So these are some main types. Let me just make sure. Okay, there we go. So these are main types of sprinkler heads. And so these are just focusing on lawn. There's different types of sprinklers for our Waterwise landscaping. By and large, unless you're in a very large property or a commercial lot or an ag field, I would say that rotor heads and impact sprinklers are probably overkill. The impact ones are the ones that pivot, more of like the ticking motion. It's probably just too much sprinkler. A lot of people tend to oversize their sprinklers, and that's how we see streets and sidewalks being successfully watered rather than just the lawn. And so spray and rotor nozzles are likely going to be the best fit for a standard residential lawn. And you do want to make sure that there's some overlap with the sprinkler, so there's not, you know, dead strips of grass in between them. But unless it's a larger property, rotor head and impact are likely not necessary. So here's that depiction of what mowing high successfully does. So this is just allowing 2 inches of grass at the top. So that's still very short, but you can see all of this root mass on the bottom, and this will allow water to be retained longer in the grass, so the grass doesn't have to be watered as long. And it also helps with outcompeting weeds. Weeds won't be able to take hold as much if the grass has more, you know, if and that goes for any plants. Invasives can't take hold as much if they can get out competition from the natives or the existing plant that's there. Here's another side by side of mowing high versus low. We can see weeds on the left side, but not on the right. All right, so now we're going to dive into Waterwise landscaping. And I'm going to go about halfway through this, and then we'll do a 5-minute break, and then we will finish. I'm already seeing several people have written stuff in the chat, so I appreciate it. Keep asking questions and making comments, and then we'll get to that during the allotted time. So what is xeriscaping? And you'll probably recognize this graphic. I totally took that from the OSU extension publication. So what is xeriscaping? So really, xeriscaping is an umbrella term, and it means water-wise landscaping. So all it means is that it's a yard that is striving to use less water than a traditional yard. That's it. It doesn't mean that there's no grass whatsoever. It doesn't mean it's just a bunch of rocks and succulents. It could very well be that, but it doesn't have to be that. It doesn't mean that there's a lack of landscape or xeriscaping. It just means xeriscaping, as in the root word xeric, meaning dry. And so that's all it is. It's striving to use less water than a traditional yard. There is so much, I guess, creative control, you could call it, or creativity, or different designs that can be done with xeriscaping. It really is property dependent. It's dependent on what your water needs are, how much water you want to save, if you want to keep sections of lawn, what color palettes you want, all of these different things. It's just as aesthetically pleasing as it is water saving and functional. So I'll just be going over some examples, but at the end of the day, it really just depends on what your interests are, and you can make it your own. So there are 7 main steps to xeriscaping, and I'll go through all of them. Plan and design, I would say, these are roughly in order, but not really. I'd say everything always comes back to plan and design. And then second to that is maintenance. You can install this great system, but if it's not properly maintained, then it's not going to last, and it's not going to function how you want it to. So I'd say out of all of these things, plan and design and then maintaining are the most important things. And I think that goes for any project. So number 1 is plan and design. So you want to create a site map, and this goes for, you can kind of use this as an example for other projects besides just xeriscaping, but sometimes determining where to remove your lawn or where to install landscaping, it's not just where do I want it, but it's where wouldn't it work. So you can do the process of elimination as well. So it's nice to have a map to scale, so you can walk around, measure all of the features on your property on a piece of graph paper, and then come back inside and you can make it look pretty. You can use different colored pencils or something, but I certainly recommend planning is the most important part. So things to include in a site map are all of the existing infrastructure. So obviously the home itself, the garage, driveway, sidewalk, if you have a shed, your AC unit, if there's any trees, if you have a wellhead, if you have a septic tank or a leach field, you don't want to be gardening around that. Just any other kind of, distinguishing feature you have on the property. What are the property boundaries? Are there any low spots that tend to kind of fill with water a lot, or any steeper areas that might be more practical to remove lawn because you don't want to mow that section? Just all the different types of features on your property. And you can even layer it with drafting paper if you want to get really fancy, so it's not too crowded. But certainly a good step to determine where to remove the lawn. Another thing with planning is budgeting. Removing lawn, by and large, is quite expensive. Not including any other component, just removing the lawn itself is easily $2 a square foot. And so making sure that if you're hiring out help, or even just to get materials, call around, due diligence, do your research for the prices, make sure you're getting a good price, and creating a budget worksheet goes a long way. Clients that I've had, that do all of their budgeting research ahead of time and kind of maybe even overkill, definitely have less budgeting surprises down the line, and they're less stressed out because of it. So definitely the most important step. There's lots of different types of design of xeriscaping. So this goes back to kind of just what you're interested in. There's more formal design if you kind of like more straighter lines, and you can pair it with some pavers and it's more of a modern look. There's kind of an in-between informal where you have more of a winding pathway. And then there's natural where you just have a couple pavers, but other than that, it's just kind of like this lush gardenscape. So lots of different types. So step number 2 is creating practical turf. And I should also mention, I'll review this in our resource section, but I have a site, there's site maps included, but it's also a fact sheet. And so that has all the steps of all of this that we'll be talking about as well. So if you're not able to jot any of this down, all of this is within fact sheet form as well. But step 2 is creating practical turf. So again, with xeriscaping, you don't necessarily have to remove all of the lawn. You're just saving whatever sections of lawn that work best for you. For example, if you have dogs, or if you have kids or grandkids that come over and like to play in the lawn, or maybe there's certain areas that just isn't practical to maintain. For example, this lovely stock photo of a slope, that doesn't look very fun to mow. And so having that be a mulched xeriscape design, kind of more of a terrace design, works just for, you know, sheer labor. Other things that you want to consider is, and this goes into the next step as well, all the different microclimates within the yard, replacing lawn with shade tolerant natives. So, you know, depending on where the sun is, where your buildings are, where your trees are, some areas of lawn might not be doing so well because they're not getting enough sunlight. And so that might be a good section to remove, and you can replace it with shade tolerant plants such as some ferns, where you don't really have to worry about watering them as much, and they'll do great in the shade because they're meant for the shade. And most, you know, residential lawn needs sun to thrive. So just considering different sections of the yard to replace, but it certainly doesn't have to be all of it if you still want that aesthetic. And if you do like the look of lawn, but you don't want to have to mow, there is always artificial turf. It's not necessarily my go-to because, you know, it's made from plastic and just not the most, when I think conservation, I don't think plastic, but they're making some really nice artificial turf anymore. So I definitely wouldn't rule it out if it's something you really like the look of lawn, but you just don't want to have to deal with the maintenance or the water. Certainly something to consider. All right, so step 3 is grouping similar plants. And so we'll dive into that. So I know this is kind of wordy, but we'll just get through it. So this again goes to those microclimates. So when you're selecting plants to replace your lawn, different plants are going to require different amounts of water, different amounts of sun. Some are going to do better in certain soil types. So it's really important to know, instead of picking a design and loving it and then hoping it works in your yard, I would rather, and I would definitely recommend, look at what you're working with and then select the plants that would work within the existing system, within the existing property. So if you have heavy clay soil and full sun and minimal water, you're going to want to plant plants that do well in clay. We actually have a site or fact sheet for that. Plants that do well in clay, plants that can do great in full sun, and plants that need minimal water. So you really want to match the plants to whatever microclimates are within the property. And this also is helpful for irrigation plants. Certain plants are going to require more water than others. And so with irrigating, because even the most drought tolerant plants are going to need a couple years of supplemental water to just get established. And then after that, it should be pretty hardy and stand alone. But they'll need to be planned out, you know, where to water. And so if you have, for example, an area where you have an existing tree, you'll need to know, okay, around this tree, it's going to be shaded. So I need to plant plants that love the shade, and probably plants that don't need as much water because there won't be as much evaporation. So just things to consider. There's lots of different types of xeriscape designs. I'm kind of just calling these a mulch design and a rocky design. I know that's super creative. So the mulched design is more strictly natives here in Southern Oregon, and I'll go over some examples. We also have plant lists of all of these. And then a rocky xeriscape design is more of that traditional replaced lawn look, where it's just kind of rocks and succulents and sages and things that you'd see more in Arizona or Southern California. I should note, if working strictly with natives matters to you, all of the plant lists or the plants listed within the mulch xeriscape design are all native to this area. Rocky, not so much, just because I know it seems like it in the summer, but we're not a true desert here. So those are more desert loving plants. So, all right, I think that was enough for that slide. So here's some examples for trees and more of that mulch design. All of these are native, and they could all do well within Waterwise landscaping. Here's some shrubs. Again, we have plant lists for all of these, so you don't have to memorize them all. So they can be very aesthetic, lots of different colors, flowers, poppies. Obviously, I have so many volunteer poppies in my yard, and they really don't need any water, so they do great. If you still want grass, but you don't want the look of an actual lawn, fescues and hairgrass are also great. I have some fescues from a few years back, and I never water them, and they're huge. Depends on the soil type, of course, but they can do super well here. And here's that more rocky design. It's more of the desert kind of landscape. So see yucca and succulents. Okay, so that was about 40 minutes. All right, so we're about right on time. So let's do a 5-minute break. And so let's resume, let's say 6:45. I'll give 2 extra minutes. So let's come back at 6:45. I will be around if anyone has questions in the chat, but other than that, we'll have the Q&A time. And
Sounds good.
And thank you, Rachel, for Oregon Flora. That's a great resource.
Yeah, I'll put some more. I'll put more. Put your website in. I'm getting yours rounded up. You probably are providing that, but yeah, sounds good.
That's good. Redundancy
Okay,
is fine.
get up, stretch, jiggle your brain, get a drink of water.
You all in 5.
Okay.
All
Welcome
right.
back.
Yes, good time. Yeah, I was gonna say my clock says 45. Maybe I'll give everyone 30 more seconds and then we'll resume. All right, so I'm going to continue now.
Sounds good.
Let's see if the slides will progress. Sometimes they get, there we go. Okay, so step 4 within the steps to xeriscaping is improving the soil. And in order to improve the soil and amend the soil, you need to know what type of soil you're working with. So there's lots of different ways to determine this, and I know you're either probably land stewards or master gardeners, and so I'm sure you've all tested soil, but just so everyone knows, there's firstly the hand test, and this can help determine roughly if your soil is primarily clay, silty, or sandy. So if you grab some soil and wet it, and you're able to roll it into a ball, it likely has a good amount of clay in it. If it rolls up pretty well, but it's kind of grittier and doesn't hold a shape super well, probably has a good amount of silt. And if it just crumbles, it likely has a lot of sand. And so all of these different soil types will have different infiltration capacities. And so that's helpful in knowing what plants to plant. Some of you, I'm sure, are aware of this, and if there's time, I can do a little demo of this website. But this is Web Soil Survey. I certainly will take the boundaries with a grain of salt. This is from a demo I did at North Mountain Park for a previous class, just threw it in there. But this will tell you back from the 1980s, there was a survey done. And this, you can see the soil type anywhere in the country. There was a survey done from 1980, and there's a whole summary in the beginning of actually how they did the data. So I won't bore you with that, but it shows you different soil profiles. And this also is utilizing our local county soil data. And so it's a really great starting point. I definitely, again, take it with a grain of salt. You're going to know your soil type best if you've already been digging around in your property, but this can help determine the different layers where there could potentially be boundaries. If you have two very different types of soils next to each other, that can describe when you, pardon me, if you have two very different types of soils together, that can describe any drainage sort of issues. And so it's just really nice to know what type of soil you're working with in order to amend it. So in this example, I just kind of pulled out kind of the basics that I always look at and recommend, clients look at when we're out in the field. So this profile is a complex, so it's a combination of different soil types. So they have a lot of things going on. They have sandy loam, gravelly coarse loam, sandy loam, loamy sand, and loam. So actually pretty darn good soil types. The kind of the most perfect soil type imaginable is loam. It's like the trifecta. It's like all soil combined makes loam. And so here in around North Mountain Park, they have good soil. It makes sense. That's why they're able to do all those nature demos. And also what I look at within the soil survey is drainage class. So it will tell you if it's excessively drained or poorly drained, and that can also describe any sort of maybe flooding concerns or water holding capacity. And I also always look at depth to water table. If it's really close to a water table, that can also describe why people might be having pooling or flooding issues. So that's Web Soil Survey. Different soil amendments. Again, I know a lot of you are avid gardeners, and so you know much better than I. Kind of the holy grail, it seems like, with soil amendments is compost. You can add it to really any type of soil, and it makes it as loamy as possible. You want to make sure that your soil isn't too sandy, for example, because you want the soil to be able to retain the water for the plants, particularly in a drought-tolerant landscaping design. You don't want it to be too quickly drained because then the plants aren't going to be getting enough water. But if it has too much clay, it might be retaining too much water, and you don't want that because you don't want it to kind of flood out the plants. You know, you want the water not to be standing, but you don't want it to drain too quickly that they're not getting the water that they need. So there's a balance for sure. And here's some basic soil pyramids, just showing us once and for all that clay is the worst for infiltration. This graphic is kind of cut off, but it basically, this right side is water holding capacity. And so clay is in the red and sand is in the blue, not surprisingly. So step 5 is mulch, and mulch is great for a couple of reasons. Number 1, it helps with weed suppression. And number 2, it can be very helpful with retaining some water. So it's not as quickly filtered off, or with evaporation. Sometimes, you know, it can help. If you don't have exposed soil, if you have some mulch covering it, it can kind of keep the area a little damp and allow that water to trickle down to the plants. I should note, just for a Firewise perspective, I know all these pictures have bark mulch, but if it's directly around the home, like against the foundation, I would not recommend putting bark mulch right against the home. I would say something like, you know, rock, or even decomposed granite would be better than bark mulch, just for, you know, safety precaution. Also, ants love it, so something to consider, not putting right next to the foundation. Oops, did not mean to go through that as quickly. So there's lots of different types of mulch. You can always try and call up some local arborists or tree cutting services. Sometimes they have excess mulch that you can get for very cheap or free. I know I've had some clients that have gotten some great deals. It's always, you know, you want to be able to trust the company so there's not a bunch of weeds in the mulch. But yeah, there's lots of different types depending on what your interests are, and depending on what your needs are for everything. So again, arborist mulch here, it has a very good water conservation little scale here. So lots of different types of mulch to choose from. Efficient irrigation is step 6. This is a very important part, making sure that the plants are watered and that they're established well enough that they will take roots and do well. Once they're established, they, besides pulling weeds and, you know, just general maintenance, they really don't need much, but irrigation within the first 2 to 3 years for any planting project is definitely important to make sure that the plants are doing well. So going back to, there's going to be some overlap with the lawn section. So watering in the morning is best, evening is second best, making sure that it's not super windy, making sure that you're, you know, utilizing the climate in the best way as possible, and the water isn't just immediately evaporating. And going back to sizing sprinklers compared to lawn, you want to make sure that with Waterwise landscaping, the irrigation is sized appropriately. I've seen a lot of times in commercial lots, there'll be huge sprinklers for just this little section of plants, and it's super overkill. It's not necessary. There's drips, there's micro sprays, bubblers, soaker hoses, just the lower flow, you know, irrigation system is really all you need for this Waterwise landscaping. And you want the water to be as close to the ground as possible. The issue with, especially with the oversized sprinklers, is that not all the water is going to fall on the plant. It's likely just going to be evaporated just due to the size. And so lower to the ground is best for Waterwise landscaping. Checking for leaks is also important. So there's definitely some overlap just with irrigation in general, checking for leaks, making sure that there's no broken pieces, because that can obviously become a counterintuitive deal if you have leaks and you're wasting water in your water conservation efforts. And altering irrigation schedule with the weather, similar to watering lawns, making sure that if you have timers that you're shutting off the system when it rains. And yeah, just altering the schedule based on whatever the season is. So these are some different examples. So the left is for grass, and then the right is for planting beds. So again, it depends on the plant, depends on, you know, just the system that you're interested in. Some people absolutely love drip, some are less of a fan. So just depends on what your interests are, and also the size of the plants. And then step 7 is maintaining the landscape. I think I already mentioned before, but second to planning, I definitely think maintenance is the most important. You want to make sure that the plants are doing well, they're watered for a good amount of time, that the weeds are being pulled, and you're not having a bunch of, you know, excess vegetation that grows in and is trying to outcompete the natives for the water. Checking for leaks and deadheading perennials, just kind of overall maintenance certainly goes a long way. Here's an example watering schedule from an OSU publication. And so as you can see, you really don't need to mow as much as you think. Watering, definitely you don't need to water as much, and we'll get into that. But into the summer, probably only need to mow about once a week, and in the winter, once a month or not at all. All right, so I'm kind of just gonna go through these examples, so I'm being respectful of time here. Normally I'll ask these questions out loud, but I'll just kind of go through these, and so we'll have enough time for Q&A. So this example, in terms of everything that we've gone over, there's definitely quite a bit that could be done here. This example is kind of a wild card, as it also ties into stormwater management, which is its own class. But first and foremost, the lawn, right, is not helping at all. This would be a lot more helpful if there was more landscaping done, ideally where it could be built up to be the same height as the road, or some sort of water loving species over here. Otherwise, there will just continue to be a hole here. I also wanted to include this because it's just such a common occurrence with driveways flooding after rain, or the street flooding after rain. This is an example where, and I know we didn't talk about it in this class, but probably needs some sort of a drainage pipe, or potentially replacing the driveway with a more permeable surface where there's under drains. So kind of a wild card, but I wanted to include this one because it's a very common occurrence. And so as you're thinking about replacing lawn and conserving water measures, it's also important to think about slope and everything like that. Also, if your yard naturally does this, if it has a lot of low points, it's more important than ever to not overwater, because if you're already overwatering and then it rains, this is going to inevitably happen. And so it's that kind of double whammy of overwatering and rain that can cause this pooling. Whereas if you weren't overwatering and then it rains, this water would be able to, or would have a way better ability to filter down into the soil. But if the water is already, you know, already being overwatered and that soil is already saturated and then it rains, the water has nowhere to go. So this is option 2, and this goes for whether it's sloped or not. You definitely don't want exposed soil like this. It's just going to turn into a muddy mess. So this is a perfect example of adding some plants. You could kind of do a terraced stair step example, but definitely needs some vegetation to hold in this slope. Could even do with maybe a little drain off to the side so it's not just creating a waterfall effect with any excess water, but it certainly needs some vegetation here. You don't want just bare soil. Ideally, this never would have happened. Having this concrete block is just kind of asking for water to flood. But if you move in and this is the situation, having vegetation put down, even some sort of ground covers, which we have plant lists for that. And I know OSU has a bunch of plant lists in their catalog as well. That would go a long way, just getting something established here. And then the lovely watering of the sidewalk and the street, the thing that we all see quite frequently. So number one, this goes to sizing, sprinklers. These are obviously way overkill for this amount of lawn. And arguably, this lawn probably doesn't even need to be here, right? It could either be mulched and landscaped, or there could just be gravel here. It's not as aesthetic, but it's more water conserving. So yeah, if you see this around your neighborhood, or if you find your property seems to, have so much excess water like this, try those tips of adjusting sprinkler heads and potentially, replacing that grass with vegetation. And because really all this would need, if there's some vegetation, it would just need some drip irrigation, and that's it. All right, so we have 30 minutes. And so I just want to open this up. If folks have questions, we can chat for as long as we want throughout this 30 minutes. And then I can review some resources as we have time.
Okay, well, I'll just start. I think I'll just start, I guess, working backwards as people can have a chance if they have more questions. Just there are a few comments in here too, and I'll just throw them out. Lawns and parkways should be banned.
I agree, Gary.
Gary had a lot of helpful things.
Nice.
Gary says, get a water audit to get accurate measurements of water use, and new rule, they need to be pressure regulated. I think the sprinklers, a design helps in creating hydro zones. Nice.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion, Gary. And if we have time, I'll show within the Medford Water Commission, if anyone's on Medford Water, they provide audit services, so we can, yeah. Great suggestion.
Do you want to stop your share, or I mean, we can leave it up there, but that kind of makes all the people show there better. Yeah, there we go. Let's see here. So Gary says, I recommend, if you are going to install an irrigation system, get an engineered irrigation design using low water use materials, low PR sprinklers, and subsurface drip irrigation. Always use a soak cycle schedule setting on your controller. How about gray water systems and rain gardens? What about smart controllers? They can save 40% of water use in the landscape. So I don't know if you want to, if you see those in there, if you want to just say anything more on that.
Yeah, so I think I was occasionally checking comments as I was presenting, and I think I mentioned smart controllers, and then I just read that. So I think we covered that. Yeah. And rain gardens, rain gardens are a great feature. They can definitely be coupled with Waterwise landscaping. I didn't have time to get into rain gardens today, but I did teach a course that's on YouTube. If you didn't hear that at the beginning, gray water is definitely something that I need to look into. It's been asked several times throughout the past few weeks as I've done classes. To be honest, I hadn't focused on gray water as much as of yet, just because last time I took a course on gray water, there was less kind of local buy-in and less local ordinances. And since we're non-regulatory, but I always want to make sure that we are recommending and following projects, up to specs, and that we're following all the regulations. And so I felt like there just was less, besides Ashland, there was just less buy-in here locally in order for me to be comfortable implementing that and recommending that. There's more work with gray water upstate, and then obviously in California, but I think it sounded like more and more people are interested. There's some demand, and so that's one thing that it's on my list to look to look more into helping that, but that's just been less of a priority now. So little
Yeah,
word vomiting, but there you
that
go.
all makes sense. And I know the towns kind of vary in terms of what they allow. We've had a couple of gray water instructions, but we haven't been able to record them. But yeah, they're great, and sometimes they're offered in other places as well. But if you get that as one of your quiver of classes, that would be super.
Yeah.
So now we have a couple of questions. What is subsurface drip irrigation?
Yeah, so I wonder, is this referring to Gary's comment? Because I'm aware of drip irrigation, but I guess I'm less familiar with the subsurface as well. I mean, it's underground, but my understanding is, the drip lines are all above ground.
Gary, do you want to, or I think that was Gary's comment. Do you want to unmute and share on that topic at all?
We might be talking about the same thing, but just to be sure.
Yeah. Okay, well, we can move on, and Gary, if you want to chime in, you're welcome to. So someone says, I live in a townhouse. Oh,
here I am. I had to get my mic set up. Sorry.
Okay.
Okay.
That's all right.
Real quick, because it could get involved, so I'm not going to belabor it too much. But subsurface drip irrigation is a new technology. Rainbird is one of the leading manufacturers in subsurface drip irrigation. Basically, the line has built-in emitters. They're pressure compensated, self-flushing, and they're spaced like 12, 18s, etc. And it's buried just below the surface of the ground. And so when you have a planting area, a plant bed, you lay the subsurface drip tubing out in a grid, and then you bury it under 3 inches of mulch. So now your evapotranspiration rate is really marginalized because the water's not on the surface. It's protected from evaporation because it's buried several inches under. Okay.
Great.
Does that help? Does that help? Okay.
Thank you, Gary.
You're welcome.
I had heard of that. I think I might have heard it using different terminology, but I always love it when class attendees can teach each other. I think there's just something special about that for information retention. So yeah, appreciate that. And yeah, so that's a great idea as well, particularly if maybe you have a larger yard and more of a risk for evaporation. Look into burying it underground instead, and then you really won't have that water loss. I think I see a question from Stephen.
Yeah, let's see there.
Actually,
somebody else said,
Christine.
did we get to that one? I live in a townhouse complex, and we have asked the gardener to reduce the amount of water going to the lawns. He says it's very complicated to fix. Any thoughts?
Yeah, it's tricky if it's out of your control. So are you within a town, or obviously you said already townhouse, so is that within an HOA, I'm assuming that
It is,
does the maintenance? Gotcha. Yeah, it's tricky. I know with HOAs, it's always fun.
Well, I keep trying to use my status as a master gardener. And it doesn't seem to be working. So I figured this is a good and this is Christine, obviously, on my husband's laptop.
Okay.
Is login. So
figured it out. Yeah.
But I find myself in this very troublesome position because even as we let our dog out, the dog comes in with squishy paws, or goes on the lawn. It's so squishy, and it's just appalling to me. And every time I bring it up, it's just very complicated. The irrigation system is very complicated. I don't know the irrigation systems. I know that you should not do what they're doing. We should not have squishy lawns and standing water, for God's sakes. But I've not gotten an audience to hear me, and I mean, I figured this is a group of folks that are into water conservation. So what the heck can I do besides fire them?
Well, I mean, it might be that if you, sorry, I was going to chime in, like if you get more folks in your complex, and maybe if you go to the owner, I mean, I would say, you know, it's a matter of building that relationship, but sometimes they are kind of complicated or difficult. Some places might need more water, but, and they're all linked together or whatever, but I would say get more people. The squeaky wheel system seems to work pretty well.
Yeah, it certainly is. Yeah, it's an educational barrier, like a lot of things. You know, people either don't know what they don't know, or they figure, well, I don't want to fix something that's broken or whatnot. But yeah, I've certainly seen that with HOA kind of systems where not all the homeowners might not feel as, or you know, renters might not feel as heard, but it's challenging. I wonder if there would be a way to, if I don't know if there's a board or if it's set up like that, but if there would be some meeting to kind of bring it up, and maybe if you can have a few neighbors with you, like Rachel mentioned, if you know, kind of ask around, kind of power in numbers, so you're not alone in it. But you know, if you could present it in, hey, this will save you money if you use less water.
That's what I would. I was going to suggest that.
And, you know, I'm curious that you did mention, which, you know, I have mentioned here too. You talked about, you know, the weather, the water definitely gets shut off at a certain time, but I think it's like programmed for like December, when, you know, here we are already experiencing, you know, not the sun, number one, number two, the rain. And I don't know. I guess it's just sometimes I get so flustered that they don't see that and understand that. And it comes down to money for sure. You know, it's, you know, wasting resources for sure, money and water. But so I can use that as a, you know, that the weather, it is, because you can turn those systems on and off at will, right? So you turn it off because anyhow, I'm just trying to get.
Yeah, you can completely shut them off. Yeah. And if you have more questions or if you want to chat more, I'm just going to drop my email in the chat here. But yeah, I'd be happy to chat more about that. That's a major one. And I know there's a lot of other folks probably dealing with the same thing. So it's a great question. There's not like an easy fix other than just trying to continue to bring it up, and but maybe offer some, the financial incentive of saving money sometimes will get them. So
even like calculating that out, you could give them some examples like what Kora did and what that might come down to. I know, actually, you said fix leaks. We had a leak. It was in the spring before I was even irrigated, and we used so much water that month. It was like, you know, it was like July when I and my neighbors had a big, you know, garden. It was amazing to kind of see that difference. If you could, you know, give them some examples of what the water use might be, maybe that might be a way to bend the ear as well.
Yeah.
But there are some other suggestions in the chat there, and I thought here's another kind of different topic. Who in Jackson County can come check your well for water quality and put a meter on it for how much water is being used?
Yeah, so in terms of well water quality, my understanding the main entity that can test that water would be Nielsen Labs. You can actually bring a sample, and there's a plethora of tests that they can do, including I think they cover everything from nitrates to heavy metals, even E. coli. There's a whole bunch of different tests that they can do. So that would be the person to come to actually help for, you know, the samples. And my understanding is with them, you would bring a grab sample to them. And in terms of putting a meter on a well, I could certainly send you some information on that, kind of just well maintenance. There's different companies that you can purchase meters from. If you have more water rights questions, there's Oregon Department, it's the local water master, and they can help with more like water transfers, if that's a concern, but if it's just kind of a well level, I can send you the well water handbook or chat with you about that more. So I think I already put my email in there, but feel free to send me an email, Opeka, if you have more questions on that. It's kind of like there's further next steps. But I think I'd be the kind of the go-to from the district to answer well questions.
There's also at OSU, I'm kind of looking this up and I can give you a contact, but just there's the Be Well study that's through OSU, and I'm not sure if they're regionally
They are
located, but
yeah, they've selected, so they're based out of Corvallis. I'm on their I don't vote on their board, but I've sat in on their meetings, and they have selected Southern Oregon as kind of a focal point for a study. And so they have done a bunch of like mailings and outreach, and then they're taking different water quality samples. Trying to recall if it was randomized or more strategic. So I don't know if it's something you can necessarily sign up for.
I can give you a contact. I mean, Kara Baylog, and they've actually just hired a woman who's a land steward to help, and I think she's going to be tabling. So again, I'm not sure if there are certain regions, but I think the outreach is pretty good. I think they've got some good funding for it, but they're testing drinking water for arsenic, nitrate, and lead with follow-up in the event of levels above regulation. So I think I could put Kara's email here, and you could reach out to her.
Great, thanks for bringing that up, Rachel. Yeah, because they're, I'm good at looking at stuff, and then if I don't know, I can look into it. But they are already experts at wells, like fully, and so that would be a great resource to reach out to, pick their brains. And they're also, I don't think they're published yet, but they will be officially publishing outreach materials for those three components, the arsenic, lead, and nitrate that Rachel mentioned. Because for example, if you go to Nielsen, you can see what your water quality is like, but there's not a whole lot of resources of, okay, this is what my well is, now what, the next steps. And so this Be Well study is very helpful in tying that in.
Kind of a different topic than what we're talking about, but yes.
I mean, it all ties in, and water source, everything water is all related. So
yes, that's right. we had our riparian day for the land stewards yesterday, and Brian Barr, who you are colleague with, he's the executive director for the Rogue River Watershed Council, and he said, well, there we have it, that's our stream of consciousness today about water.
It's a great pun.
I thought that was really good. Yes.
Like a solid dad joke. His office is directly above mine, so we also pride ourselves on dad jokes at the district. Fun fact. Anyways, nice. Now that's unrelated to this talk completely. Seen lots of comments about different, the board, the HOA stuff, permaculture design. I mean, I saw the question from Erica. I mean, we can do free site visits and stuff like that. I'd say if it's specific to permaculture, probably less of a priority just compared to all the other projects we're working on, but we've certainly helped with kind of whole property consult permaculture stuff.
So if it's water specific, because I have a current, I got certified in permaculture design, and so I'm doing just stewarding land projects where I'm helping people just a pro bono to get skills in this arena. And then
I think you muted yourself.
Sorry, I was trying to camera. I'm trying to help people just with rainwater catchment design, but my current steward does not even have a well yet at all. So I would love to see somebody with experience in rainwater design, and this Xeriscaping could come just look at the land maybe after I come up with my ideas. Is that something that I can maybe email you about and we could take offline? See if there's potential for you to support that with some insights on how they could better catch the water, catch the rain.
Yeah, we can chat. Yeah, definitely a large component of what we do is that technical assistance. So, and even if you want to have me out, if you're going out on a site and it'd be nice to just get a second pair of eyes out there to kind of see what it's like. Yeah, I'd be happy to join you. Schedule's kind of all over the place, but yeah, I can certainly set some time up to chat. And we also have a lot of resources and fact sheets and stuff because it's just, yeah, it's just getting started, where to start. I'm still learning a bunch of stuff and I'm 6 years in. And I'm not a contractor, I'm not licensed. So I just want to make sure, I mentioned that, but I can certainly kind of help with just overall big picture stuff.
Yeah, us either. And the client doesn't have a ton of budget. So it's more like, what can they do with the manpower that they have within their circle? So yeah, I would love that. We're actually going out there, I think, in a couple weeks on the 18th. So maybe there's an opportunity we could, you could join us for even if it's just a half hour. So
okay, yeah, go ahead and send me an email. I think I already listed it on there. I can list it again. But yeah,
I copied it and emailed it to myself. So thank you so much. And
great, yeah.
Thanks for offering this to to the community. This is like conversation has to be taken very seriously. Christine / Stephen. So I'm with you there. Yeah.
Erica, you also asked about the well water handbook, and that's the Oregon Water Resources Department. And I put a link to the PDF there, but you can find the books around. I have some. I'm not sure where you're located. Are you in our area? Are you?
Yeah, I'm in the Merlin. I'm in Grants Pass.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I'm not sure, but anyway, there it is. If you contact their office, sometimes they'll send one to you. It kind of depends. Cool. I get them for my classes, but that link is the book.
Great. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Is there any other questions? It looks like we have a little bit of time to review some resources if there isn't any others. All right, well, maybe I'll reshare my screen, and then if anyone does have questions, feel free just to type it in the chat, or I wouldn't be offended at this point if someone just wants to unmute and interrupt me. It's kind of low key at this point, so we have plenty of time. Great, and thanks again, Rachel, for putting all that great info in the chat. All right.
Thank you for your information.
Yeah.
And folks, if you go to the chat box and you click the 3 little dots, that will save the chat to your computer if you haven't copied things down.
All right, so I'm going to reshare. I'll probably be resharing and exiting out as we go to online, so apologies in advance if it's a little. So right now I'm going to just pull up our website, just shameless plug. I know OSU Extension has their amazing catalog. Ours is definitely less detailed than that, but I wanted to show you where to find our plant lists and fact sheets since I know I've mentioned them a few times. So if you just go to jswcd.org, and I might have to reshare if this doesn't work. Can everyone see this? Did that work? Sometimes it doesn't like it when I pop up a different window.
Oh, we're still seeing, I think, the slide. I'm not sure if you meant to go to the web page.
Yeah. I thought I would try that, but I had a feeling it wasn't going to work. Okay. Are you seeing the web page now?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, great. So if you go to jswcd.org and you go to how we help and you hit resources, there's a bunch of different natural resources we have here. So if you hit plants and then plant lists, there's a bunch. I have a problem. I have an obsession with making plant lists. I need to stop. So it's more, Rachel understands. Rachel's a botanist. Yeah, it is what it is. So so in terms of, so we have Xeriscape plants. So if we click that, and this is I kind of combined a bunch of plant lists and cited them at the end. I should note that all of these little red asterisks, these are the prohibited plants within 30 feet within the city of Ashland due to Waterwise standards. And so just want to make that clear for folks that are in Ashland, or if you're going to be working with clients in Ashland. But here's just some examples of kind of more drought tolerant species. This is more of that lush garden design. So I don't know why that's, here we go, it's acting strange. So there's that. So there's lots of different kinds. And I don't know if every time I change the window, I feel like I have to change this. Sorry, guys. But yeah, so that's the plant list. There's lots of different fact sheets and plant lists that we have, but that's the section within our website. So I'll share my screen again, and then we'll move on to, if it works. So here's that web soil survey. So for those of you who aren't aware of how to find this website or exactly how to get this report, we kind of talked about the layers already, why it's useful and the things to look for, but how do you get this thing? So I'm gonna stop again. I don't know how to make it any easier than start and stop, start and stop. Okay, so all I'm doing is I'm typing in Google web soil survey, and Rachel posted that as well. Great. So I'm going to share my screen again, and it will bring you to a screen like this, and you're more than welcome to type in your own address as I type this in. This will just be a little demo here. So you hit the big green button that says start, and it'll bring you to this page. And there's kind of different ways on how to get the survey, but I have a main way that I'll just show you now that'll actually spit out a PDF, but there's ways to look at the layers within the actual website itself. So if you go to the left column under quick navigation and address, you can type in any address in the entire country. So I'll just type in our office address. It's not very case sensitive. I've kind of sloppily typed in stuff before and it always works, so that's nice. So and now it's just making sure it's the right property. So it'll bring up a aerial map of the area, the lovely little old concrete jungle area that we're in. Not much greenery, ironically. So the thing that I will bring you to is this tiny little button called the AOI area of interest. There's a way that you can do it where it's just a standard rectangle, or you can do more of a custom design. Since this block system is set kind of, you know, not true north, I'm going to do the custom design. So this is our property. I'm going to go just beyond that so you can see any soil overlaps. You can see what's going on with the neighbors. And so I'm just going to do a little shape around here and then double click. And that'll get the final shape. And then once we do that, we want to look at the report. So we're going to go to our shopping cart that's free, which always makes me laugh. And then we're going to check out of our free shopping cart and get now. Okay. And this might open up a separate window, so let me know if you can't see this, Rachel, but it's loading, it's thinking.
This was always the part I couldn't figure out.
Oh, okay. Well, good. So hopefully this is helpful then. So now this will spit out a PDF. And so this is all the info of actually how they got this data. So if you scroll down, how it's made. So sometimes when I'm printing this out for clients, you know, I'll just need to print out a couple pages. So this shows that there's 2 different soil types within this little grid that we made. And so if we scroll down again, so we see these 2 types, agate windlow complex and central point sandy loam. And then it'll show you the actual layers of each. First thing that points out is there's cemented material 25 inches down. So that might affect plants, you know, water capacity, if there's any drainage issues, things like that. So just a really nice resource. It tells you the different kind of landforms it's within. The whole soil profile obviously is probably the most important part. The ability of ponding and drainage. So it's a nice resource. Looks like we have 1 more minute. So I'm going to exit out of that. There's a few other resources here that I don't think I have time for, but I'd be happy to list them within the comments here. Just a big shout out to Medford Water Commission. I'm always referring to them. They have a really great website. I'll link it down below here. That is has really great design ideas if you're wanting to implement Waterwise landscaping. And there's different tours that you can go on locally, like tours as in a virtual tour, where you can look at different plant examples. So that's that one. And there's also one for Ashland. So, you know, they're just far away enough that there could be kind of different climates going on. So those are the two websites for that. It helps with gardening tips, kind of lawn tips. And then there's Medford Water Commission. If you just Google Medford Water Commission watering recommendations, that will also bring you up some great watering tips. So I'm just gonna write that in here. Sorry, I can't talk and type, but I'm out of time. So, oh, and I think I have, yeah. So I think that's all the time we have.
Yeah, that's great, Kora. Thank you. I don't know if you have a list. I'm not sure that you do, and I'm not asking you to make one if you don't. But if you have a list, I'll be processing the recording tomorrow and sending it out to the registrants. So if you have, a list of something you'd like to share, I'm happy to share that with folks.
Sure. Yeah, I can send out some follow-up notes. Yeah, I can do that tomorrow. Not a problem.
Or if you have a slide that includes that or something like that. I don't want to give you extra work. We really appreciate you putting this on, and it's been very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, if you want, I can just convert these slides into PDF, and if you want to share the slides and then all the resources be in there. Does that work? Okay.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
Great. I'll do that.
All right. Thanks very much. Thanks for joining us tonight, everyone.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Thanks for your time and for all of your interest in water conservation and all the other things that land stewards provide. So thanks for having me.
Woohoo! Yay, SWCD. Okay.
Have a good night.